An old man with a white beard and a rolled umbrella is walking down a Parisian street. Unknown to him, he is being filmed by someone wielding a newfangled movie camera. The resultant footage is the only known film of the renowned painter of Parisian life and one of the big hitters of Impressionism, who liked to keep the public at bay. That old man is the then 80-year-old artist and today's history maker, Edgar Degas, famed for both his impressionist masterpieces and for guarding his privacy. Born Hilaire Germain Edgar Degas in July of 1834 in Paris, France, the oldest of 5 children, with a mother, Celestine, who was from New Orleans, and a banker with artistic tastes for a father. He was called Augustin. While the young Edgar grew up in an artistic environment, his mother would die when he was just 13, and though he had been painting from a young age, his father expected him to go to law school, which he duly did in 1853, though he applied very little effort there. In 1855, he would meet an artist who set him on the path to being an artist himself. This was Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, whom Degas revered and whose advice he would never forget. In 1856, Degas would travel to Italy and remain there for 3 years. In Naples, he made the first studies for his early masterpiece, the Ballet family. This painting is a portrait of his aunt, her husband, and their 2 young daughters. The painting has been interpreted as psychologically penetrating, with the placement of the figures suggestive of the parents' alienation from one another, with the father seated apart and mostly in shadow. This alienation between the sexes was a recurring condition in Degas's work of the 1860s. It is displayed masterfully in the 1868 work, Interior. This depicts a tense confrontation by lamplight between a man and a partially undressed woman. Described as the most theatrical of all Degas's compositions of modern life, items are arranged as if they are props, while the dramatic lighting, which I particularly am impressed by, increases the impression of a play being enacted. When he returned to France, Degas occupied a studio in Paris large enough for him to work. At first, he devoted himself chiefly to historical painting, but became more interested in contemporary subject matter, with the change in his art being influenced primarily by the example of Edouard Manet, whom Degas had met in 1863. With the Chrysanthemum Woman, painted in 1865, we find already the qualities of the great artist that Degas became. It is claimed that from this picture his real career as a painter dates. In the following year, he exhibited at the Paris Salon a picture of a steeplechase, the first of a long series of racing scenes which are among his most characteristic productions. While the Franco-German War interrupted his work, he served in a battalion commanded by Henri Rouart, who afterwards bought several of his works, including the famous Dancers Practicing at the Bar. He joined a group of young artists who were organising an independent exhibiting society. The group soon became known as the Impressionists. Between 1874 and 1886 they mounted 8 art shows known as the Impressionist exhibitions. Degas took a leading role in organising them and showed his work in all but one of them. He had little in common with Monet and the other landscape painters in the group. Conservative in his social attitudes, he abhorred the scandal created by the exhibitions as well as the publicity. He also deeply disliked being associated with the term Impressionist. The resulting rancour within the group contributed to its disbanding in 1886. While in 1872, Degas, returning to work, had begun the long series of theatrical paintings which have made him famous. In that year, he painted the Ballet de Robert le Diable. Among other superb works of this period are the previously mentioned The Interior, La Dame au Miroir, and L'Absinthe. This last picture was much discussed and violently attacked. From about 1877, there is a change in his technique to be observed, and this is probably to be attributed, in part at least, to the influence of the Impressionists. From about that date, his method becomes much broader, one might almost say more brutal, and his colour more vivid and daring. He also began to use a great deal the medium of pastel, to which he ultimately almost entirely confined himself. About 1883, he began a series of studies of the nude, which are among his most remarkable works. While he is often seen as coldly voyeuristic, he is famed for his peeping Tom studies of women dressing and undressing in bathrooms and bedrooms, washing and toweling, scratching and combing, gathering their hair into thick auburn bundles. Yet the man who cultivated a reputation as a misanthropic bachelor, who, according to Manet, was incapable of loving a woman or even telling her that he does, is renowned as the master who, in picturing his unidealized women, worked with more luscious sensuality than any artist since Titian. He contributed a considerable number to the last Impressionist exhibition in 1886. Since that date, he continued to paint the same sort of subjects, but simplified his method more and more, while he produced his desired effects with the least possible means. Movement and light interested him above all, and his latest works are rapid studies of movement in daring effects of light. Personally, Degas was a man of peculiar character and believed that the artist must live alone and his private life must remain unknown. He lived an outwardly uneventful life. However, he had a brilliant wit which lost him many friends and made him many enemies, as his remarks were often ill-natured. His anti-Semitism intensified in the 1890s, and he broke off relations with all of his Jewish friends, publicly disavowed his previous friendships with Jewish artists. In his last years, Degas was rather sad and lonely. His old friends were either dead or, by his own fault, estranged from him. For several years before his death, he had been unable to paint on account of his failing eyesight, and this increased his melancholy. He found amusement in making figures of dancers in wax, which showed that he might have been a great sculptor, so had he wished. During his life, public reception of Degas's work ranged from admiration to contempt. Recognised as an important artist in his lifetime, Degas is now considered one of the founders of Impressionism. Though his work crossed many stylistic boundaries, his involvement with the other major figures of Impressionism and their exhibitions, his dynamic paintings and sketches of everyday life and activities, and his bold colour experiments served to finally tie him to the Impressionist movement as one of its greatest artists. Although Degas had no formal pupils, he greatly influenced several important painters, including Walter Sickart, but his greatest admirer may have been Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. Degas's paintings, pastels, drawings and sculptures are on prominent display in many museums. Degas would lay dying in a Paris apartment in 1917, almost blind and bedridden, while his few friends would say he looked like a raging King Lear, a notoriously difficult, curmudgeonly character who never married. When he died on September the 27th, few lamented his passing. Yet his work is now among the best recognised and most popular art in the world, with his ballet pictures considered to be among the most inventive achievements of Impressionism. Therefore, Edgar Degas is without doubt a history maker.